Hi everyone, I'm Chloe Sherbeck. I work at Na'a Ilihi Fund, and I am Hunkpapa Lakota and Ojibwa, and I do census work with natives and native country to help ensure that we have a more complete count for the 2020 census.
Hi, I'm Samantha Biasca. I'm Haida Tlingit and Inupiaq, and I work with Na'a Ilihi Fund also. And we are hoping that we can design this as an online webinar that people can watch, and at the end of it, take a quiz on SurveyMonkey to make sure that they retain the information. And then once you get 95% right on the Trusted Messenger training quiz, we will send you a certificate of completion for you, and we'll also send the organization you're working with an email also. Today we're going to be going over the Trusted Messenger guide that is available for download on pnwnativescount.com. So if you want to follow along, it's pnwnativescount.com, and you can download the book right from there and print it out at home or just look at it online. So we want to start with page 4 on the Trusted Messenger Training Guide to talk a little bit about Na'a Ilihi Fund, which is an intertribal nonprofit and public fund established in 2000 to focus on powerful Native female-centered activism and leadership. We've been working and preparing for the census for years as an important step towards our goals to amplify the voices of Native people. Na'a Ilihi Fund was selected by the Washington State's Office of Fiscal Management in collaboration with the Washington Census Alliance and Seattle Foundation to facilitate Census 2020. So our goal is to account for tribal organizations through training, technical assistance, and funding.
Yep, and so some people may not know what exactly the Census Bureau is. The Census Bureau is the federal government's largest statistical agency. They are dedicated to providing facts and figures about the people, places, and economy in America. And federal laws protects everyone's confidentiality of everyone's census responses. And the census takes place every 10 years, so it's taking place in 2020 and then again in 2030 and etc.
So one of the major things as a census that I've come across is a lot of misinformation and also sort of fear about from that. And so I developed page 5, this pitch, which if your organization wants to make into flyers, take a picture of it and post it online, we highly recommend that. So the census pitch is really how we do the census in the way that makes sense to Native people. So signs and billboards and things that talking at the census, not many of them are able to reach Native audiences where we're able to see them, recognize ourselves in it, and see how us filling out the census is going to have a tremendous impact on Indian country. So in that sense, I wanted to create a page in the booklet that's just dedicated to facts and figures that are affecting us and our communities and our relatives. So in Indian country today, tribes are losing out on at least $3,000 annually for every tribal counted in the census, which adds up to $30,000 in lost funds per person until the next census count, which is $120,000 for a family of 4 that tribes can lose out on potential funding for when we're not filling out the census. So the census data is used to create statistics, which are used to distribute $675 billion annually in federal funds. Approximately $1 billion of those dollars go into Indian country every year. And with that, Native Americans are the most undercounted in the nation. So those missed tribal members mean fewer dollars Medicaid, SNAP, TANF, Section 8 housing, WIC, Pell grants, vocational rehabilitation grants, after-school programs, free school lunch, healthcare centers, and much more. If we were able to get a complete count of Indian country, we are hoping to get $2 billion in with the census every year. And then the programs that we utilize will have more funding to be able to provide us more services. And ideally, our communities would be able to thrive with those extra dollars that we've always deserved and we've always had the numbers for, and just haven't had the numbers on the census data that we know we have.
Yeah, and it really does affect our tribes and our communities for 10 years until the next census, because when tribes are applying for grants or other federal funding, they have to use the census to show how many members they have, and they have to use it even if they know that the numbers show a severe undercount, but they have to use the census. So if there was a more complete count, we would get funds that are more representative of our population.
Absolutely. So there, Chloe is talking a little bit about for every tribe. So those numbers, $3,000 annually, $30,000 until the next census that tribes are missing out on. That's what we're able to calculate of federal. That's not even beginning to count the number of grant funding we've not been able to get because our numbers appear so little in the census. So once we have the numbers of Native households in the United States, the number of Native people in the United States, will have you be a lot more accurate, and our grant writers for every tribe will have a lot more to work with when they're applying for grants. They're going to be able to say, because we have to reference those census data for every grant that we're applying for. And so now with a complete count of the census, we'll be able to show how many households we have across the nation that we're trying to provide services for. And it'll have a huge impact on not just these federal dollars and services that we apply for, but also grant funding. So some of the federal programs that we apply for, not that we apply for, but that we receive with the census data is Title I grants to local education agencies, adding up to about $13.9 billion. And about 90% of Native students attend Title I grant schools. It also affects the Head Start program with about $8.3 billion. And about 10% of Native children and pregnant women participate in Head Start and Early Head Start. Indian Health Services relies on the census data. The federal government distributes funds to Indian Health Services with about $4.8 billion. So Indian Health Services provides services to 2.2 million Natives nationwide. Medicaid receives about $312 billion, and in 2016, 43% of Native Americans were enrolled in Medicaid or other public insurance programs. The Urban Indian Health Program receives about $40.7 million, and approximately 25% of Native people live in urban areas and counties served by these programs. SNAP dollars receives about $69.5 billion, and 26% of Native households nationally and 32% on reservations receive SNAP benefits in 2015. It also affects Indian housing block grants, Indian community development block grants, and Section 8 housing vouchers. So when we talk about what's at risk, about federal funding decisions for your community using census data based on population size, which may result in less funding and services to your community. We can have more information and more funding, and it begins.
And Native Americans have historically been undercounted in the census since the very beginning, because we, as Indigenous people, were left off the first 6 census counts, and then after that, the census was done by enumerators, and they would just guess people's races based on whatever they thought, just based on looks. And it wasn't until 1970 that the government had mail-in censuses that allowed people to self-identify what they were. And when that happened, it led to a dramatic increase of counted Native American people. So the numbers increased 110% between 1980 and 2000. And so why the undercount is still current is because Native Americans are about 2% of the total U.S. population, about 5.6 million as of 2016, yet about 1/3 of Native Americans live in hard-to-count census tracts, which means that they're less likely to be counted. And our long history of distrust of the government from broken treaties and unmet needs makes our tribal citizens reluctant to fill out the census. And many reservations have housing that lacks physical addresses and rely on P.O. boxes, and the census doesn't mail to P.O. boxes. So those people have been unable to be counted in past years. And so this year the census will be taken online, which will allow people without like housing addresses to take the census, but then it also means that you have to have internet. And most of Indian country lacks broadband access. So overall, tribal communities have limited resources and access to funding that supports complete census count work. And this is where you, whoever's watching, as a trusted messenger will come in.
Absolutely. And just to clarify a little bit about that, so the mail materials to P.O. boxes, and so if you've lived in a house without a physical address, or where the post office does not mail to your physical house, that census is going to be done in a few ways. So they can update leave, which means that they're going to drop off census forms in front of your door for you to mail in at your convenience, or through enumeration. So those areas are harder to count according to the census, but ideally everyone will be counted in the census. And so with the trusted messengers, they are community members by tribal organizations to educate and engage their community with the census count. So when you're talking with your organization, it's important that you guys work together to develop an outreach plan. So you know who in every organization is doing what. If one person's going to be doing mostly calls, online work, if another person is going to focus on their family, if you're working for a tribe, or calling down their enrollment roster so that everyone who's enrolled in that tribe knows how to identify. So you're going to work together as a team to really figure out your best outreach strategy. So you can have a conversation with each household by asking, what do they already know about the census? Why do they think? And then provide basic information about the census that relates to the things that they care about. After you're asking, what questions do they have? And remind them 10 minutes to fill out the census. So for each trusted messenger, they are to have 80 hours of outreach, in which we're hoping and expecting them to reach at least 50 different households, 50 different Native households, at $20 an hour. So we know that this is a big job for every community, and we are really hoping that every trusted messenger is able to do their best to make sure that people really understand what the census is, how the funding affects our community, knowing that $3,000 annually per person adds up really quick. And so with some reservations just in Washington, we've seen them lose millions of dollars for their undercount. And with other reservations, we've seen their reservation be cut in between two counties because the census data also affects redistricting. So when we're thinking about the census and we're relating it to people that we know, if I was calling my cousin and I know that she happens to have kids that use free school lunch programs, I might talk to her about that and let her know that there'll be more funding available if she's sure to be counted in the census. Because Native American people have been reluctant to fill out the census and have not been included in the census in the past, we have structural barriers, and also we have more distrust and widespread misinformation in our communities. So it's really important that we get these facts and figures out. And feel free to, if you'd like us to mail you one of these books, we'd be really happy to mail it to you. So when you're doing outreach, you can quote that. And then in the last page of this, we also included a reference page so you can see where we're getting our statistics from. So normally in our trainings, we ask you to read what the census is going to look like. But as of today, the census is already online, and we are encouraging you to fill it out. And so you can check out the census at
my2020census.gov. And so the census was supposed to mail the 12-digit code to some households, and you have the option to enter that 12-digit code, and that just means that they're geo-tracking your house and you don't have to enter your address. But if you don't have that code, or you don't want to wait for it, or you aren't going to get one in the mail, you can just click I don't have one, and then you just put in your address and you can continue filling out the census.
And for people who do not have physical addresses, who may be experiencing homelessness, you can still fill out the census online if you have internet abilities. So if you're at a place that you're able to receive some internet, or with a friend or family member who might have internet, and let you use it. So you can, what you check is, I do not have a family, and it asks if you're experiencing homelessness. You can check yes. And then you just, on the it asks you what zip code you reside in, and then it asks you to describe where you stay at. And so you're able to complete the census online with that. Another thing that the census asks this year, for the first time ever, is for a phone number. So the Census Bureau will call you only for official Census Bureau business. So if you're filling out your census and for some reason it wasn't clear, maybe you checked several, they only wanted you to check one on paper, or as an intersex person you wanted to choose both genders, so that's what you did. So if the Census Bureau has any questions, they are able to call this year if you put in your telephone number instead of sending an in-person enumerator to your door to ask you that way. Especially with the coronavirus, we highly suggest that people put in a contact number, but we are also that the Department of Justice has purchased cell phone data apps. So let me say that again. So the Department of Justice has purchased about over $1 million of self-location data. And so what that means is if you are someone who does not want the government to be having your cell phone for whatever reason, if you have a warrant, if you don't have a cell phone, or things like that, please list a family member or friend's landline if available, if they feel comfortable with it, a number of social worker, case manager, services, or a tribal so that way if the Census Bureau does have questions, they're still able to get a hold of you. If you don't feel comfortable with those options, please make up a phone number, because what is important, every single question is answered on the census. How you answer is up to you, and we highly suggest being strategic with how you're answering this. In order to get the most amount of leverage, to get the most amount of funding into our communities. So what we're doing with Na'a'ilihi Fund is that we are making strategical recommendations so that we're able to get the most amount of funding into their communities possible. And also keeping each other safe. So making sure that our elders know that nowhere on the census are they asking your social security number. They are not asking you for credit card information. They are not asking you for bank account information. If someone is asking you those things, they are not a Census Bureau employee. So we want to keep each other safe, and we also want to make sure that we're thinking of the census as a political tool to receive much more funding into Indian country with relatively little effort. So with that, they ask for each person to provide names, sex, birthday, or like the race, as well as if you own or rent your house, and then also staying with you. And then for each additional person, they will be name, if they live or stay somewhere else, and how the person is related to number one, every additional person's sex and date of birth and race. So a lot of things are obvious why they're asking. They want to create statistics about the number of people that are living and staying in each household. They want to create statistics when they ask if you're owning or renting your home, because they want us to create statistics about the economy. Homeownership is a really great indicator to see how the economy is doing, and also where they need to be having more public housing programs in which areas. They ask for every person's name to make sure that every person in a household is counted. They ask about age, because they want to, or if they're asking about age for each person, especially if someone lives or stays somewhere else, such as a kid, they want to be sure that every kid is counted at least once for every census. And so really for kids in two households, that's going to be really important. They want to make sure that, for example, I put Chloe on my census, and Chloe was also on the census, and Chloe has the same exact name and the same gender, the same birth date, the same race, and the same zip code or area. The census is able to filter out any duplicates, and so Chloe will only be counted once.
Yeah, and that's really important. So every household will only complete one census, and you want to count everyone in your household, even if they stay there like temporarily, or maybe you have a family member or a kid that is away at college, but usually they stay at the house, or if you have kids that only stay there, or you know someone or a family member that's experiencing homelessness, you want to try to count everyone that you think is less likely to get counted, because it's better that they get counted twice and they're filtered out than if they aren't counted at all.
Exactly. We know that Native American community member is much less likely to be counted than any other demographic. So really what we want to do is making sure everyone is counted at least once. And in our community, what we're doing as organizers in the community and community members is that if you think someone might not be counted on another census, so group quarters are enumerated. Federal census employees will go around all dorms, all shelters, all people who are incarcerated, all homeless encampments, and they're supposed to count every person. We know that with the outbreak of the coronavirus, how enumeration happens might be a little bit different, and we also know that it's going to be delayed by 2 weeks. So where they were hoping for early non-response follow-ups in the mid-April, now they'll be 2 weeks later. So what we do in the community is trying to get everyone counted on online census forms as possible, especially because the phone banks that they have also are going to be delayed by 2 weeks in opening to make sure that everyone is safe with the coronavirus. So if, for example, you have a family member who is experiencing homelessness, please count them on your census because they might not be counted elsewhere. If you have a family member who is experiencing incarceration, please count them on your census and list them as their tribe, because if they not counted through enumeration in person asking about the census, and if DOC is in charge of counting everyone and doing the enumeration process that way to limit contact and exposure to the coronavirus, they may count all of our relatives as Native. They might be counting them based on what they look like to reduce contact person to person. So even if your family members are counted twice, we want to make sure that at least one of them has the correct information and the correct tribe, so that way we're able to receive the funding and also so make sure that every person is counted. So we are you count people you don't think will be counted elsewhere. If you have in foster care and their foster parents might not know what tribe they are, it's really important that you count the correct information on your census, and also check the box that they live or stay elsewhere part of the time. If you have someone that stays on your couch part-time, but not all the time, if they're couch hopping, it's really important that you count them on your census, because even if they are counted in several places, the Census Bureau will be filtering that out automatically. Whereas if no one counts them on their census, then our rates will continue to appear extremely low, and we as a community will continue to be called statistically insignificant. We know how significant our community is, we know how widespread we are, and we also know that everyone is counted. All of these dollars add up to our community members, so even if you live off the reservation, your community back home will still be able to receive some of the funding. It is where you live, so the census funding does go to your street, your potholes, it does go to your school district. But when you're saying that you're Native American and you're identifying with a specific tribe in the United States, that tribe is able to count you in all the grants that they're applying for. They're also able to receive funding that way. And even if you live off reservation, you still might receive some programs. You still, when your kids are getting older and they're applying for scholarships, they can apply for scholarships through your tribe. So it is really important to be strategic with where you're selecting your money and putting your answers, because it is how they're filtered out through the government. We also know for our non-binary community members that these forms are incredibly exclusive. And unfortunately, there are only 2 genders listed on the census form, and each person can only be selecting one gender. So when filling out online, you won't be able to get to the next page without choosing one gender. And if the census forms aren't filled out completely, an enumerator might call or come in person. So for this form, this political form, we are suggesting choosing one gender that that suits you best. And we're also really clear that we did lobby for there to be more inclusive options, and we will be lobbying in the future to change these forms to be more accurate and respectful of our Two-Spirit and non-binary community members. Another really, I think the most important part of the work that we're doing is talking about how to be Native. We know that the people who have work at the Census Bureau are not legally allowed recommendations on how you filled out the census forms. And so that's where community members and partners will come in. It's extremely vital that we get this information out because people might not be getting it in other sources. So how you're counted as a Native American in the census is actually a little bit more complicated than it might seem, and Chloe's going to walk us through that.
Yes, so to be counted in all the census statistical data as Native American or Alaskan Native, you should only check that you are, on the census it says American Indian or Alaskan Native, and so you should only check that box even if you are multiracial. Like I'm multiracial, but I've decided to only check that I am American Indian or Alaskan Native because I want to be counted in all of the data, and I want to make sure that the most funding goes to my tribe and to community services. So that is one way.
Yeah, so just to clarify, so we know that about half of our community members are solely Native American and about half of our members are mixed race. And so we want to be really clear that the only way to be counted as Native American in all of the census data pulled from the 2020 census is to be only choosing the Native American Alaska Native race box. We are really proud to both be multiracial and to both be Native American people who are proud of like all sides of their ancestry. However, with this form, when in the past I've white and Native American, I have not appeared in all of them as Native American. Oftentimes I'm put into a different category of mixed race people. Mm-hmm. So we're able to count multiple races in the census quite recently in the last 50 years. And what the data is pulled from for mixed race people is a lot slimmer than people who are portraying themselves as one race on the census. And our community is so small that when we are choosing multiple races on the census, it makes our already small community group even smaller. So even though it's entirely possible for the census to be choosing to be using all of them by about mixed race Native American and people who are only Native American, they are not doing that. And a lot of people, they're only using the data who are saying that they are only Native American as Native Americans, even though our community is very multiracial and extremely beautiful of that. So we're not advocating that anyone feel any type of way about this. So much letting people know that who identify is up to them. But this is one very important way that members can be counted every single as Native American if they so choose. And if people do want to be multiracial because they're proud for any other personal reason, that's I think that we just want to get the message out that they may not be counted as Native American in all of the census data pulled. And so that's completely up to each individual. We just want to make sure that we are giving everyone information, making smart decisions for themselves and their community. The other really important part about Native American is the person number one.
Yes, so to have your household counted as a Native American household, the person one, who's the person who's filling out the census for everyone in the household, should be Native American. Because, for example, if there was a household full of Native people, but then person one wasn't Native American, that household wouldn't be counted as a Native household. So, yes.
Yeah, so in mixed race, whoever is choosing person number one, the entire household is considered ethnicity. And so household data is handled separately than individual race. So as we talked about earlier, every single person in the household will be counted for their race, and that reports their total population count for every demographic in the U.S. But it's really important that the Native person in the household is listed as person number 1, so it is counted as a Native household. If, as Chloe suggested, you're in a mixed race household, so example, like maybe where someone's growing up in a white household, if the white person was choosing to be person number 1 on the census, it would be considered a white person with many Native Americans living there. So that's really important. It's also really important to let people is being asked for selecting your race, and so no asking for a tribal enrollment card or a certificate of degree of Indian blood. It's completely self-identification, and it is very important for your tribe to see how they'll be identified in the census and make sure that you have the spelling right. So even though your tribe might usually go by abbreviations because you have a very long name, that might not be how you're counted. In fact, you might not count towards your tribe's total population count to that abbreviation in there. For example, I might just, since I'm Haida and Tlingit, I might put on my census Haida and Tlingit tribe. But if I did that, I wouldn't count towards the Central Council of Tlingit and Haida people because I didn't put in their entire name. So you're going to be checking with your tribe and let them and let everyone about the census know that there is 200 character spaces on this year's census form, and if your tribe's name is longer, please write outside the boxes, because whatever you write outside the boxes will be counted. So another really fun thing about the census is that we trace our family tree from past census counts. Family was counted in the past censuses. Census information is completely confidential and private for 72 years, which is the average lifespan of Americans. And after 72 years, it becomes public record. So you can find your ancestors and learn more about your family tree if you like. And in 72 years, descendants will be reading about you. But what's happening, to talk a little bit about being confidential. So the Census Bureau cannot, by law, you producing your answers and identify you. They can only be producing statistics based off of that. So they cannot share your information with law enforcement rooms or allow it to determining your eligibility for government benefits whatsoever. So one of the biggest things that I hear from Native people is that they don't want to count everyone who lives with them because they're afraid of losing their HUD housing. But when you think about it, your answers are completely secure and confidential for 70 years. The only possible way you could potentially lose your HUD housing is if you still live in the 72 years from now. You have the same landlord 72 years from now, and they were like really excited about your genealogy. But even then, you're able to use something so far in the past against you. So even in that extremely unlikely circumstance, it still wouldn't be against you. So it really is important to count everyone in your family, especially if you think they might not be counted elsewhere on the census. So now that you're really excited about this, I want to tell all of your friends about it. Chloe's going to talk about on social media and also different hashtags that we're going to be using to promote the census.
Yes, so some hashtags we're using are like hashtag census, hashtag 2020, hashtag native counts, hashtag I count, hashtag native census, hashtag all natives count. So when you're doing outreach on social media, that's a great way. These are some great hashtags to put on your posts, so then they can be all like collected and you can share all the outreach you're doing with other groups across the nation. And some other little...
So also on page 15 of the Trusted Messenger Census books are just some different things to think about. So if you're really excited about the census but you're not sure exactly what to say about it, this is just some examples. So you could of yourself, write it with a paper message saying like why it's important, how that data affects you and your community. And you can also say things like, make yourself count. Our ability to vote is impacted by the census. Our services are at stake. Census data is used to make decisions on your behalf. It affects our future. So getting counted in the census provides a good future for your children. Make your voice heard, to be heard, and that can't happen without you participating in the census. So those are just a couple of ideas of things that you can say online. And there's an RR we'll be coming out with also. And so this is really important to think about the timeline. So this is live right now. And as of today, March 15th, there have been over 5 million Americans who've filled out the census online, which is awesome, but definitely not all of us. So it's important that we fill out the census online, and also if we know that some of our community members maybe have access to phone but not internet, you can help. And actually, that's a really great way where we can help each other out of the coronavirus, which we want to talk a little bit about how the plan is going to be changing based on that. So we, in the past, we were putting aside money for events, which have now all been canceled, and we were going to be doing a lot of our outreach events. And so for our regular census grant, what we are recommending that you do with the event money instead, is putting in more trusted messengers, encouraging your trusted messengers to all the majority of their outreach now, either online or so limiting as much person-to-person contact as possible. You know, when you're stuck at home on quarantine or lockdown, or babysitting your kids and as a family. If you want to continue, we're talking to all of our members and talking to them about the census, about why it's important, what it affects, reminding them that when they're home for so many weeks, the least that they can do is spend 10 minutes making sure that they have more access to a better and that we're taking care of our elders that they're using and relying on right now. And so one way we're able to take care of all of our members is to not just fill out our, encourage all of our family members and friends to be filling out theirs. So definitely be calling, FaceTiming them. Being sure to connect with one another is going to be in these upcoming days. And while we're with them, it's important that we talk about the census. Some other ideas for census outreach that some community groups have been doing, Chloe can talk a little bit about.
Yes, so a lot of community groups have had to cancel events, so some ideas of what one group is doing is they're doing indigenous medicine care packages and then distributing them out to elders in the community and others with compromised immune systems. So, and sticking like these in each care package or like little pamphlets or other census materials, so they're still getting the information out there, but it's not a large gathering and they're not putting anyone's health at risk. Or you could do online buys, like I know Facebook does it. It's like you can boost your post for X amount of dollars, and then it'll have a bigger audience, and that could help with your outreach. Or you could do like online raffles, and or take a picture of each one of your trusted messengers with like I think the census is important because like I matter or I count or something, and then it's a good way to introduce people to your team without like person-to-person contact or anything like that. So it's really just a time to get creative with social media and like phone calls and everything, and to still get the message out there.
Absolutely. And so with our grant, we are really encouraging people to be continuing to do outreach, to still reach their 50 allotted, at least 50 people of their community, and also to make sure that people are making informed to make the best choices possible for themselves, their community, and for their tribe. And with that, we want to encourage you guys to reach out to Chloe if you have any questions. If we didn't that you still had questions out, please email us. Please call us. We're going to be continuing out there, and we're really excited about how we can work together, especially in this time. and where we need to be more united than ever before.
Yes, and I just wanted to recap that the ways that you can receive the census this year will be you could do it online. Some people will be getting it in the mail through the, what's the thing where they get it at the door?
Yeah, with leave behind. If you live in an area, it's takeaway leave behind, and so really they're going to be, if you're living in an area that does not have, like if you rely heavily on P.O. boxes, you're not getting any postal mail to your physical house, then the Census Bureau is going to be leaving you the paper forms out at your convenience and mailing in. But anyone can be filling out the census online, and that's the easiest and quickest. Also by phone, you can call in to the different phone numbers available. And I think especially in April, that's going to be more available as they're able to set up more phone banks. Right now, the best way is online. But if you would like to, if you prefer to fill out your census by paper, you can also request paper. If you census print and you need it large, that from the Census Bureau also. And right now, Chloe, give them the website.
My2020census.gov.
Awesome. Feel free to email Chloe and I with any questions that you have.
Yeah, and also that the census, again, I just really want to stress this, the census by law is required to keep all your responses confidential, and anything that they do share can only be used to produce statistical data that can't identify you in any way, and they do not share it with law enforcement, courts, or the government to determine your eligibility, so they do not do that, and it's confidential for 72 years before it becomes public record. And on the census, they do not ask if you have like outstanding warrants, or they do not ask you for your criminal background history if you're a U.S. citizen, or any like your social security number or anything like that. And if you get anything from the census that you think looks fishy, feel free to like contact us or contact
the Census Bureau.
The Census Bureau, because you don't want to be giving out your personal information that the real census isn't asking for.
Absolutely. And then if you finished watching this, please go on Monkey and take the Trusted Messenger quiz. And once you 95 or more % on the quiz, we'll be sending you a certificate of completion, which will be really important, and you'll be officially a Trusted Messenger if you aren't one already. So that's going to be really important. Continue taking the quiz as many times as you need to pass. So we just want people to be aware of that also. And so you can check the links below for the SurveyMonkey quiz and also for Chloe and mine's email. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.